My house always smells like cinnamon and lavender. Norman says it's the smell of old age, but I call it the scent of comfort. We bought the house in Downers Grove 37 years ago, when Clayton was 3 years old. It was our first and only big family project. A two-story house with a white picket fence, a garden in the backyard, and a porch on which to have tea in the evenings. I wiped the dust off the frames of family photos displayed on the mantelpiece. Here's Norman and I on our wedding day, me in a simple cream dress, him in a navy blue suit. Very young, with a twinkle in their eyes and faith in the future. And here's Clayton from infancy to college graduation. I used to update this collection every year with new photos. Right now, however, there is an empty space here for Clayton and Octavia's wedding photo. She insisted on having their wedding photos taken by a concept photographer, but never bothered to send us any. I can hear Norman fiddling in the garage with his vinyl record collection. At 69, he's still alert and full of energy, though gray has long since taken over his once brown hair. Having retired 5 years ago, he was finally able to devote time to all those hobbies that previously lacked hours in the day. Financial analysis had been replaced by gardening, fishing, and endlessly poring over vinyl records. Vivian, Dash, he calls me. Have you seen the Sinatra record? The one in the blue envelope? In the closet, second shelf from the top, I answered without even thinking. After 42 years of marriage, I know where every single thing in our house is. It's both a blessing and a curse to notice all the details. I hear him mutter something thankful, and I smile. Norman has always been absent-minded, especially when it comes to household minutia. At one time, it drove me crazy, but now I find it almost endearing. It's part of who we've become for each other. He loses, I find. My work as a curator at the Downers Grove Historical Museum taught me the value of detail and systematicity. I spent 35 years there before retiring 2 years ago. Sometimes I miss the quiet halls, the smell of old documents, and the feeling of being part of preserving history. But most of all, I miss the feeling of being needed that my job gave me. I finish cleaning up and sit down in my favorite chair by the window. It overlooks the garden, which now, in early fall, plays with all shades of gold and purple. I glance at the clock, almost 3. Clayton and Octavia should be here by 4. They come over for dinner every second Friday of the month, a tradition I established so I wouldn't lose touch with my son after his wedding. Clayton has always been my sunshine. A smart, kind boy with a disarming smile and a genuine interest in everything in the world. As a child, he could sit next to me for hours at the museum, listening to me talk about the exhibits. As a teenager, of course, he became distant, as all kids that age do, but after college, we became close again. He came to our house for dinner every Sunday, talking about his work as an architect, his projects, his dreams, and then he met Octavia. I can't say I disliked her at first sight. That would be unfair. I really tried to see in her what my son saw. Octavia Weathers is a 30-year-old owner of a designer clothing boutique with impeccable taste and a cold look in her brown eyes. She's always immaculately dressed, always polite, but behind that politeness, I sensed something fake from the start. After the wedding, Clayton changed. At first, it was little things. He called less often, his visits became shorter and more formal. Then I noticed how he began to avoid talking about money, about work, about the future. His eyes lost the sparkle that had always been in them. Octavia, on the other hand, during visits, was always talking about things they couldn't afford, trips they had to postpone, the life their wealthier friends were leading. Norman, of course, noticed nothing suspicious. To him, Octavia was a modern woman with ambition, and he wrote off the changes in Clayton as growing up and family life. "You're too hard on her," he told me. "You just can't accept that your boy has grown up." Maybe he was right about something, But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with Clayton, that Octavia was changing him, and not for the better. I notice a familiar silver sedan pulling into the driveway. They're half an hour early, which is unusual for them. They're usually late. I step out onto the porch to meet them. Clayton gets out of the car first, tall, thin, with the same brown hair that Norman had when he was younger. But in his posture, in the way his shoulders are slumped, I see fatigue and tension. Octavia comes out next, impeccable as always, in a white pantsuit and a large designer bag that I'm sure wasn't there last time. Dash, dash, Mom. Clayton hugs me, but there's no warmth in his embrace. You look good. Hello, Vivian. Octavia nods slightly, making no attempt to hug me or even shake my hand. What a lovely day. Come in, I say, letting them into the house. Norman's in the garage. I'll go get him. I follow Norman, leaving Clayton and Octavia in the living room. When we return, Octavia is standing by the mantelpiece, looking at pictures, and Clayton is tapping his fingers nervously on the armrest of the sofa. Clayton, my boy, Norman smiles broadly, hugging his son. How's work? Still working on that museum complex? Yes, Dad. The project is moving, although slower than I would like. Clayton smiles, but the smile does not reach his eyes. And how's your boutique, Octavia? I ask, though I'm not really interested. Oh, it's doing just fine. She sits down on the couch, putting her foot on the leg. I just got the exclusive rights to sell the Brianna Hope collection. You probably haven't heard of her, but she's a rising star. I nod, pretending to be impressed. In fact, I know who Brianna Hope is, a young designer whose dresses cost what Norman and I spend on living expenses in 6 months. Dinner's almost ready, I say. Why don't we have some tea? At dinner, the conversation is strained. Clayton talks about his projects. Octavia interjects comments about how her husband's work is underappreciated. Norman asks about architectural details. I'm mostly silent, watching Octavia cast glances around now and then, as if assessing what and how much our house is worth. After dinner, Norman and Clayton retire to the garage. Norman wants to show his son his new record storage system. I stay in the kitchen with Octavia, who has volunteered to help me with the dishes, which is odd in itself. She usually finds an excuse to avoid any housework. You have such a cozy home, Vivian, she says, handing me a plate to wipe up. And so many interesting things. This brooch that hangs on the mirror in the hallway looks very antique. It's my grandmother's brooch, I answer. It's over 100 years old. It's not very expensive, but it's valuable to me. Oh, of course, family heirlooms are priceless, she smiles, but I notice the glint in her eyes. It's not warmth, it's calculating. As they walk away, I notice Octavia holding her bag especially carefully. Something in her demeanor makes me wary. I hug Clayton goodbye and whisper, "Is everything okay, son?" "Sure, Mom." He pulls away quickly. "I'm just tired. There's a lot of work to do." They leave, and I go upstairs to change. As I pass the dressing table, I notice that the drawer where I keep my jewelry is ajar. Strange, I distinctly remember closing it this morning. I open the drawer fully and start going through the contents. My pearl necklace is not there. It's not the most expensive piece of jewelry, but it was Norman's gift for our 20th anniversary. I go downstairs and find Norman in the living room watching the evening news. Norman, have you seen my pearl necklace, the one you gave me for my 20th birthday? No, dear. Where do you usually keep it? In my dressing table drawer. But it's not there. Are you sure? Maybe you put it somewhere else. I'm absolutely sure, I said firmly. I saw it yesterday and put it in the usual place. Norman sighs and turns off the TV. Vivian, you've been complaining a lot lately about things going missing. One silver spoon, then $50 out of your wallet, now your necklace. Maybe you just. He's stammering for words. What? Getting forgetful? Going out of my mind? I can feel the anger rising inside of me. Norman, I know exactly where and what's in this house. I don't lose things for nothing. That's not what I meant. He raises his hands in a conciliatory gesture. It's just that we all forget things sometimes. I lose my reading glasses all the time. It's not the same, and you know it. I sit down in the chair across from him. Norman, I think someone is taking our things without asking. He looks at me puzzled. Who? No one visits us except Clayton and Octavia. You don't mean to say, that's exactly what I'm saying, I interrupt him. Things started going missing after their visits. First, the little things. The brooch Octavia was so complimentary about today disappeared after their last visit. Then the money from my wallet. Now the necklace. Norman shakes his head. Vivian, this is absurd. Clayton is our son. He would never steal from us. And Octavia. Yes, she's a little arrogant, but she comes from a good family. Why would they steal? I don't know why, I say quietly. But I do know that things go missing, and they go missing after their visits. It's just a coincidence. Norman stands up. Let's look for your necklace together. I'm sure we'll find it. We've searched the whole house, but the necklace is nowhere to be found. I know it wasn't just lost. It was stolen, and I'm pretty sure by who. As I lay in bed that night, I think about my son, the boy I raised with love and care, who was always honest and open. What happened to him? How did Octavia manage to change him like that? Or maybe I never really knew my son. I decide I have to find out the truth. If Clayton and Octavia are really stealing our things, I need to know for sure, and I need proof that even Norman can't deny. The next morning, I start making a list of all the things that have gone missing in the last 6 months. It's an impressive list. A silver spoon from a set I got from my mother, 2 antique books I collected, my grandmother's brooch, a pearl necklace, about $200 in cash at various times. None of this is fabulously expensive, but it adds up to a decent value. I decide not to talk to Norman about it anymore. He won't believe me without hard evidence anyway. I have to catch them red-handed, and I already have a plan. The week since the pearl necklace disappeared has been agonizingly slow. I can't stop thinking about the disappearance, going over possible explanations in my head. At times, I'm almost ready to believe Norman, that I'm just being forgetful. But then I remember the gleam in Octavia's eyes when she was looking at the things in our house, and my confidence returns. On Wednesday, I decide to call Clayton. I usually avoid calling him at work, but now I feel like it's necessary. I want to talk to him without Octavia present. Maybe he'll be more candid in private. Dash McLean and Associates, Clayton Thornberry speaking. His voice sounds formal, professional. Clayton, it's Mom, I say, and I hear his tone change. Mom? Is something wrong? No, nothing urgent. I just thought maybe we could meet for lunch today. It's been a long time since we've talked alone. Pause. I can almost see him frowning, thinking up an excuse. It's not gonna work today, Mom. I have a meeting with a client at 1 o'clock, and I have to get ready. Maybe some other time? Sure. I try to hide my disappointment. But Clayton, I wanted to talk to you about something important. After your visit with Octavia, I can't find my pearl necklace, the one Dad gave me for my 20th anniversary. Have you seen it? Again the pause, longer this time. No, Mom, I haven't seen your necklace. His voice becomes strained. Are you sure you didn't put it somewhere else? I'm absolutely sure. It's always in my dressing table drawer, and it's not the first thing that's gone missing since your visits, Clayton. What do you mean? His tone changes, becomes defensive. In the last 6 months, a silver spoon, my grandmother's brooch, 2 antique books, money from my wallet have disappeared. All this after you and Octavia came to see us. You're accusing us of stealing? His voice is rising. Really, Mom? I'm your son. I'm not accusing anyone, Clayton, I say calmly. I'm just asking if you've seen these things. No, I haven't. And I can't believe you think Octavia and I would steal from you. Geez, Mom, don't you think you're getting a little paranoid? His words are hitting me harder than I expected. So now I'm not only forgetful, I'm paranoid. I can't help the bitterness in my voice. That's not what I meant, Clayton sighs. It's just, as people get older, sometimes they start to see things that aren't there. Maybe you should see a doctor. I don't need a doctor, Clayton. I want my necklace and the rest of my missing things. Mom, I have to go. I have a meeting. We'll talk about this later, okay? He hangs up without waiting for me to answer. I sit staring at the phone, feeling a mixture of resentment and anger building up inside. My own son thinks I'm an old woman out of my mind. That evening, I tell Norman about the conversation with Clayton. He frowns, but doesn't take my side. Vivian, you shouldn't have accused him over the phone and at work. Of course he was upset. I wasn't accusing anyone, Norman. I just asked him if he'd seen my things. But the implication was obvious. Norman shakes his head. Look, I understand that you're upset about the missing necklace. It meant a lot to you. But maybe Clayton's right. Maybe you should see a doctor. At our age. Don't you start. I'm interrupting him. I'm not losing my mind, Norman. I know things go missing, and I know when they do. He raises his hands in a conciliatory gesture, but I can see he doesn't believe me. I see the same condescension in his eyes that I see in Clayton's. Poor old Vivian, making up stories about stealing because she can't face her own aging. The next day, I go to the supermarket and meet Helen Prescott, our longtime neighbor who now teaches at the same school where her sister's daughter, Fiona, went to school. Fiona is about the same age as Octavia, and as far as I know, they hang out in the same Downers Grove social circles. Vivian. Helen waves hello to me. How are you? Long time no see. Hello, Helen. I smile, genuinely happy to see you. Yes, too long. How are you doing? How's Fiona? Oh, I'm doing the same old thing. And Fiona just got back from Europe. She went on a honeymoon trip with her husband. A year after their wedding, you know. They've been saving up for this trip. That's wonderful, I nodded. Norman and I had always dreamed of traveling in Europe, but somehow we kept putting it off and putting it off. Speaking of traveling, Helen lowered her voice. Your sister-in-law, Octavia, recently posted pictures of the Maldives on social media. Such a luxurious vacation. Fiona was just in awe of their overwater bungalow and private butler. She said a vacation like that costs a fortune. I felt something cold clench inside. The Maldives? With their financial situation? Really? I'm trying to sound casual. They didn't mention this trip. Oh, that was last month. Helen waves her hand. I thought you knew. Fiona says Octavia is always posting pictures of expensive purchases and traveling. She recently bought a bag from some Italian designer that cost as much as a used car. Fiona just doesn't understand how they can afford it because Octavia's boutique has only just got back on its feet, and Clayton, though a talented architect, hardly earns enough for such luxury. Helen keeps talking, but I'm not listening. I'm running numbers in my head. Maldives, designer handbags, jewelry, and all this on an aspiring architect's salary and the income from a small boutique? Where do they get that kind of money? I bid Helen a polite farewell, promising to drop by for tea sometime and hurry home. I need to check something. At home, I turn on my computer and log on to Instagram. I have an account that I hardly ever use, but I occasionally look at pictures of family and old friends. I find Octavia's profile and start scrolling through her page. What I see amazes me. Photos of luxurious restaurants, expensive hotels, designer clothes and jewelry. Here she is in the Maldives, tanned in a white swimsuit against the turquoise water. Here she is with Clayton in some expensive restaurant in New York. And here's a picture of a new bag, the same one Helen was talking about, with a price tag big enough to buy a used car. And everywhere are captions along the lines of, "Life is too short to deny myself pleasures. Only the best for my skin/hair/wardrobe. Work hard, rest even harder." I don't see a single picture of Octavia in her boutique or at work, just luxury and idleness. Clayton appears in a few photos, always a little tense, with a strained smile. He looks like he feels out of place amidst all this ostentatious luxury. I close the laptop, feeling the anger building up inside. I'm almost certain now that my suspicions are correct. They're stealing our stuff, selling it, and funding their lavish lifestyles. Or worse, Octavia is forcing my son to steal from his own parents to satisfy her exorbitant appetites. Norman returns from fishing in the evening, content and relaxed. I decide to show him what I found. "Norman, look at this," I say, opening my laptop and showing him Octavia's profile. They were in the Maldives last month. She has a bag worth several $1,000s. Where did they get that kind of money? Norman frowns, looking at the photos. Maybe Octavia's business is doing better than we think? Or are her parents helping out? Her father seems to be some kind of businessman. Her father owns a small print shop in Chicago, I say. That's not the kind of business that can sponsor this kind of lifestyle. And Octavia's boutique is barely afloat. She complained about it last month. What are you saying, Vivian? Norman closes the laptop and looks at me. That they finance their lives by stealing your jewelry and silver spoons? That's ridiculous. Can you offer another explanation? I can feel my voice rising. The silver spoon, the brooch, the necklace are just things I've noticed. Who knows what else they could have taken? And they clearly have more money than they can make. Vivian, listen to yourself. Norman shakes his head. You're accusing our son of stealing based on a few pictures on the internet and a couple of missing items that you may have just put in the wrong place. That's absurd. You're always defending him. I can't hold a grudge. Even when all the evidence points to something being wrong, you refuse to see it. Because I know my son, Norman stands up, and I know my wife. You've always been a little overly suspicious, always seeing trouble where there wasn't any. Remember when you were sure the museum curator was stealing artifacts? Turns out it was an inventory error. This is a completely different situation. I stand up too, feeling my hands shaking with anger. And that incident was 20 years ago. I'm not making up problems, Norman. I'm just seeing what's happening right under our noses. I'm not going to discuss it. Norman raises his hands. Not now, not when you're in this state. I'm going to bed. He walks away, leaving me alone in the living room, with my laptop open and a feeling of utter powerlessness. Why doesn't anyone believe me? Do I really seem that inadequate? The next day, I decide to talk to Clayton again, but now face to face. I arrive at his office toward the end of the workday and wait for him in the parking lot. When he comes out, he looks surprised and not too happy to see me. "Mom, what are you doing here? We need to talk, Clayton," I say firmly. "And this time, I'm not going to let you walk away from the conversation." He sighs, glancing around the office building as if looking for a way out. "Okay, but not here. Let's take a walk." We walk to a small park not far from his office. The fall air is cool and I pull my coat tighter around me. "What did you want to talk about, Mom?" Clayton doesn't look me in the eye. "I saw the pictures on Octavia's Instagram," I say bluntly. "Minus Maldives, expensive restaurants, designer clothes. Where did you get the money for all that, Clayton?" He pauses, his face hard. "You follow us on social media?" His voice is full of indignation. What's next, Mom? You gonna hire a private investigator? Don't avoid the question. Where's the money coming from? It's none of your business. He turns away. Octavia and I are adults. We can handle our finances as we please. It becomes my business when valuables disappear from my house after your visits. I can't take it anymore. Mine is Clayton. What's going on? Is Octavia making you steal? Or have you decided you can take my things without asking? You're crazy. He looks at me with a mixture of anger and pity. I didn't steal anything from you. Octavia didn't either. If you can't find your stuff, that's your problem, not ours. Then explain to me how you can afford a vacation in the Maldives and thousands of dollars worth of bags. I'm not backing down. Your salary as an architect and the income from Octavia's boutique can't cover such expenses. Octavia has savings, he says, but his voice sounds unsure, and her parents are helping. Don't lie to me, Clayton. I spoke to Helen Prescott. Her niece Fiona knows Octavia. Her father's business isn't booming enough to sponsor your lifestyle. Clayton turns pale, and for a moment I think he's ready to confess. But then his face hardens. I don't have to account to you, Mother. Not about my finances or anything else. If you can't accept that your son is grown up and living his own life, that's your problem. And if you keep accusing us of stealing, we'll just stop coming to you. Do you understand that? His words hurt me deeper than I ever expected. My son, my boy, speaks to me as if I were the enemy. What happened to our intimacy? When did we become strangers? Clayton, I just want to understand what's going on. I say quietly. I'm worried about you, about us. There's nothing to worry about. He takes a step back. I have to go. Octavia is waiting for me at home. He walks away without looking back, leaving me alone in the park with the feeling that I've lost him for good. When I get home, I find Norman cooking dinner. He looks up when I enter the kitchen, and he realizes by the look on my face that something is wrong. You talked to Clayton. It's not a question. Yeah. I sit down at the table, feeling suddenly tired. It was unpleasant. I told you not to push him. Norman sighs. What did you tell him? I tell him about our conversation, holding nothing back. Norman listens, frowning more and more with every word I say. You couldn't just let it go, could you? He says when I finish. Now he'll probably stop talking to us altogether. Is that what you wanted? I was going for the truth, Norman. I slam my hand on the table. Why is it so hard for you to believe that our son can do wrong? Why do you always take his side, even when all the evidence is against him? Because I know my son. Norman's raising his voice. And I know my wife. You're always dramatizing everything, always seeing the worst in people, even your own son. I don't dramatize, I just face facts. I can feel the tears running down my cheeks. Why can't you at least entertain the idea that I might be right, that things really are going missing, that Clayton and Octavia really are living beyond their means, that something is wrong? Norman is silent, turned away from the stove. His shoulders are tense. I don't want to discuss this anymore, he says finally. You're upsetting yourself and ruining your relationship with your son, and with me too. We eat dinner in silence, each absorbed in his own thoughts. When Norman leaves to watch TV, I stay in the kitchen, going over the events of the last few days in my head. No one believes me. Not my husband, not my son. They think I'm a paranoid old woman making up problems where there aren't any. But I know I'm right. And I'm gonna prove it. If that means catching Clayton and Octavia red-handed, so be it. I'm working out the details of the plan before I go to bed. I need bait something valuable enough to get their attention, but not so expensive that I can't sacrifice it for the truth. And I need a way to prove that they're the ones who took it. Falling asleep next to Norman, who has defiantly turned his back to the wall, I already know what I'm going to do. I'm going to prove myself right, even if it's the last thing I do in this life. I wake up the next morning with a firm resolve. Norman is already gone. He left a note saying he went fishing with Patrick, his buddy from the jazz club. It's for the best. I don't need his skeptical looks and disapproving comments. I eat breakfast, get dressed, and head to the bank. The First National Bank of Downers Grove is a small brick building on Main Street where I've been a customer for 35 years. Inside, I'm greeted by a familiar face, Rebecca Willis, the account manager who helped Norman and I open a deposit for Clayton College years ago. Dash Mrs. Thornberry. She smiles welcomingly. How are you? Haven't seen you in a while. Hello, Rebecca. I smile back. I'd like to open a new account and get a credit card. Rebecca is a little surprised. Norman and I already have a joint account and 2 credit cards that we hardly use, but she doesn't ask too many questions and walks me into her office. What type of account are you interested in? She asks as we sit down at her desk. Just a regular current account, I answer, and a credit card with a small limit, say $60,000. I want it to be my own account, not a joint account with my husband. Rebecca nods, but I notice a shadow of worry in her eyes. She probably thinks I'm going to leave Norman or something. It's ridiculous after 42 years of marriage, but I'm not going to tell her the real reasons. Of course, Mrs. Thornberry. I'll need your papers and the paperwork takes about an hour. I sign all the necessary papers, provide my income information, pension and small dividends from investments, and Rebecca says I'll get the card in a few days by mail. One more thing, I say when the formalities are complete. I'd like to set up notifications on my phone for every transaction on this card. Is that possible? Of course, Rebecca smiles. Many of our clients prefer this kind of control. I can set that up right now. She shows me how the bank's mobile app works, helps me install it on my phone, and sets up notifications. Now I'll get a message every time the card is used, with the amount, time, and location of the transaction. Great, I nod, satisfied. Also, I need to deposit some money into my account. I pull an envelope of cash out of my purse. The $6,000 Norman and I had been saving for the bathroom remodel. He won't be happy when he finds out, but it's a necessary sacrifice. Rebecca accepts the money without showing surprise. It's not such a large sum after all. Your card will be activated automatically as soon as you receive it, she says. If you have any questions, feel free to call me directly. I thank her and leave the bank with the feeling that I have taken the first step towards justice. The card arrives 3 days later in a plain white envelope. I activate it following the instructions and check that the notifications work by making a small purchase at the local supermarket. Everything functions perfectly. I receive an instant message with details of the transaction. Now I have to wait for Clayton and Octavia's next visit, which is scheduled for this Friday. I'm not sure if they'll come after our last conversation with Clayton, but Norman insisted on inviting them as usual. You can't ruin a family tradition over one fight, he said when I expressed doubt. Let them come. Maybe you and Clayton could make up. I agreed, not telling him my plan. The less he knew, the better. Friday morning, I take out the jewelry box where I keep my jewelry and carefully go through its contents. There's not much of value left in there. Most of my best jewelry is already gone. But there are a few vintage brooches, a couple of silver bracelets, and my wedding ring, which I only wear on special occasions. I put the new credit card in the most prominent place in the jewelry box so that it catches my eye as soon as the box is opened. Then I return the jewelry box to the dressing table with the lid slightly ajar, as if I had been careless and not closed it completely. Norman returns from working in the garden around 3 in the afternoon, just as I finish making dinner. It smells delicious, he says, kissing me on the cheek. Are you making your signature roast? Yes. I smile, trying to look as casual as possible. I know Clayton loves it. Norman puts his arm around my shoulders. I'm glad you decided to let this missing things thing go, he says. Family comes first. I nod, not trusting my voice. If only he knew what I was planning. But soon he'll know. Soon everyone will know. Clayton and Octavia arrive at 5 o'clock sharp this evening. They look tense, especially Clayton, who avoids making eye contact with me as he hugs me in the hallway. Octavia nods coldly, making no attempt to hug or even shake my hand. Come in, Norman tries to lighten the atmosphere. We're having a roast of Vivian's special recipe tonight. Dinner passes in awkward silence, interrupted only by Norman's attempts to make conversation about neutral topics: the weather, a baseball game, a new supermarket that has opened downtown. Clayton responds with one-word answers. Octavia barely speaks at all, only occasionally glancing around as if assessing the situation. After dinner, Norman suggests that Clayton go down to the basement to show him the new lathe he has bought for his hobby of making wooden boxes. Clayton reluctantly agrees, and they leave, leaving me alone with Octavia. How about some tea? I offer, trying to be polite. No, thank you. She shakes her head. I need to use the bathroom if you don't mind. Sure, I point upstairs. You know where it is. Octavia heads up the stairs and I start clearing the table, listening carefully to her footsteps. They move farther down the hallway, but instead of turning toward the bathroom, they continue onward, toward my bedroom. I quietly climb the stairs and stop at the bedroom door, which is ajar just enough for me to see what's going on inside. Octavia is standing by my dressing table, opening a jewelry box. She quickly goes through the contents, and her eyes light up when she notices a credit card. She looks back at the door, but from her angle, she can't see me. She then quickly takes the card and slips it into the pocket of her tight pants. I silently back away and walk back down to the kitchen, feeling my heart pounding in my chest. Everything is going according to plan. I've caught her red-handed. Octavia comes downstairs a few minutes later, her face calm, but I notice a slight blush on her cheeks. Your bathroom is so cozy, she says with a fake smile. I love those antique embroidered towels. Thank you, I smile back, trying not to show my excitement. It's my grandmother's work. The towels are over 80 years old. Soon Norman and Clayton return, and Octavia immediately announces that it's time for them to leave. Already? Norman looks disappointed. But we haven't even had coffee. I have an early meeting with the supplier tomorrow. Octavia looks at her watch. And Clayton needs to finish the project by Monday. Clayton nods without looking at us. Yes, we really should get going. Thank you for dinner. It was delicious. They leave, and I feel strangely calm. Now, all we can do is wait. I'm not telling Norman what I saw. I need hard evidence, not just my word against Octavia's. I hardly sleep at night, keeping my phone next to me on my bedside table. I wait for the notification that will confirm my suspicions. It arrives early in the morning at 6 hours and 37 minutes. The sound of the message jolts me out of my superficial slumber. I grab my phone and stare at the screen. Card transaction 44444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444444 Amount $48,500. Payee, Luxury Escapes Travel. Location, online payment, $48,500. I'm stunned by the amount. That's almost the entire limit of the card. I checked the transaction details on the bank's app. It's for a two-person Luxury Escapes Bali vacation package, including first-class airfare, a villa with a private pool, and spa treatments. Not half an hour later, another notification arrives. Card transaction 444444444454338. Amount $7,400. Payee Tiffany and Company. Location online payment. I stare at the screen, not believing my eyes. They spent $56,000 in one morning, and they spent my money by stealing my credit card. Norman wakes up and sees me sitting in bed with my phone in my hands. "What's wrong?" he asks sleepily. "Is it bad news?" "On the contrary," I say, turning to him. "Very good news. I finally have proof of what I've been telling you all along." Norman sits up in bed, rubbing his eyes. "What are you talking about?" I show him the notifications on my phone. "Here, look. These are the transactions on my new credit card that Octavia stole yesterday from my jewelry box. She and Clayton just spent $56,000 on a trip to Bali and jewelry." Norman frowns, looking at the screen. "I don't understand. What new credit card? You didn't tell me you opened a new account." I take a deep breath and tell him everything: how I opened the account, got the card, set up the notifications, and deliberately left it in the jewelry box to get Octavia's attention. How I saw her take the card, and how I now have proof of their theft. Norman listens with an expression of disbelief on his face. "You set a trap for our son?" He shakes his head. "Vivian, you've gone too far." "I went too far? I can't believe my ears. What about them? They stole my credit card and spent $56,000. That's not just stealing, Norman. That's a serious crime." "Maybe it's some kind of mistake." Norman averts his gaze. "Maybe Octavia thought you let her take the card. Or maybe Clayton didn't know she took it." "Don't be naive." I get out of bed angrily. "Do you really think they could have mistakenly spent $56,000 on someone else's credit card? Clayton knew exactly what he was doing. He paid with that card for the travel package and jewelry online from their home computer. It was done intentionally." Norman looks lost. I can see reality slowly creeping into his mind, shattering the image of the perfect son he has so carefully preserved all these years. "What are you going to do?" he asks quietly. "First, I'm going to call Clayton," I say firmly. "I want to hear what he'll say when I tell him I know about the theft." I pick up my phone and dial my son's number. After the third ring, he answers. His voice sounds carefree, almost cheerful. "Good morning, Mom. Is something wrong?" "You don't usually call this early." "Good morning, Clayton," I say calmly. "How'd you sleep?" "Probably fine, since you've already spent $56,000 on a Bali vacation and jewelry." There's a long pause. I can hear his breathing change. "Yeah, don't know what you mean." His voice is strained now. "Don't make it worse by lying, Clayton," I say firmly. "I know that Octavia took my credit card out of my jewelry box last night. I saw her do it, and I get notifications of every transaction on that card. 48,500 on Luxury Escapes Travel and 7,400 on Tiffany. It's not a mistake or a coincidence." There's a pause again, even longer. I hear whispering in the background. Apparently, Octavia is beside him. "Mom, listen, it's not what you think," he starts, but I interrupt. What am I supposed to think, Clayton? That you accidentally took my card and accidentally spent $56,000? Or that you had every right to take my things without asking? The card was in the jewelry box. His voice sounded defensive now. We thought you left it there for us, as a gift. I can't hold back a bitter laugh. A $56,000 gift? Really, Clayton? That's the best excuse you could come up with? You always said you wanted us to travel, to see the world. He sounds almost desperate. And you know we can't afford those trips on our paychecks. So you've decided you can just take my money? I can feel the anger rising inside me. Just like you took my pearl necklace, grandma's brooch, my silver spoon, and everything else that's gone missing from our house in the last 6 months. Mom, it's not. He's stammering. We didn't. Don't lie to me again, Clayton. I say quietly but firmly. I know the truth, and now your father does. And if you don't return all the stolen items and cancel these transactions immediately, I will go to the police. You won't do that. His voice sounds scared. I'm your son. My son would never steal from me, I say, feeling tears come to my eyes. My son was an honest and decent man. I don't know what you've become, Clayton, but that's not the boy I raised. I hear him sigh deeply. Okay, Mom, we'll cancel the transactions and we'll return everything we took. Just please don't go to the police. It would ruin my career. You have 24 hours, I say, and hang up. Norman looks at me with a mixture of shock and admiration. I can't believe you did this, he says quietly. And I can't believe he admitted it. He hasn't admitted everything, I reply, sitting down next to him on the bed. But it's a start. Now he knows I'm not some out-of-my-mind old woman who makes up stories. Now he knows I won't let him keep stealing from us. Norman takes my hand in his. I owe you an apology, Vivian. I didn't believe you. I thought, he shakes his head. I didn't want to see the truth. I know. I squeeze his hand. No one wants to believe the worst about their children. But sometimes we have to face reality, no matter how painful it is. What are we going to do next? He asks. We wait and see if they keep their promise, I reply. If they cancel the transactions and return the stolen items, we'll decide how to proceed. If not, I pause. If not, we'll have no choice but to go to the police. Norman nods, his face serious. You were right all along, he says. And it's my fault for not listening to you. The important thing is that you are listening now, I say softly, and that we're in this together now. We sit in silence, holding hands, realizing that our family will never be the same again. But at least now, we're both facing the truth. 2 days pass after our conversation with Clayton, during which Norman and I live in a strange limbo. We barely talk about what happened, as if tacitly agreeing to give each other time to think about the situation. Norman spends most of his time in the garage, tinkering with the woodwork. It's always been his way of dealing with stress. I, on the other hand, decide to take action. On Monday morning, when Norman leaves for the home goods store, I pull out a large box of winter clothes I keep in the pantry. Instead of sweaters and scarves, it holds my journals and photo albums. I've always been pedantic about documenting our family life. I set everything on the dining room table and begin to methodically sort through the materials. First, I find pictures of all the missing items. There's the pearl necklace Norman gave me for our 20th wedding anniversary. I'm pictured with it around my neck, smiling for the camera. Here's my grandmother's brooch with small garnets. I photographed it for a family heirloom catalog I was compiling a few years ago. A silver spoon from my mother's set. It has a distinctive engraving with the initials E.M., Elizabeth Morrow, my mother's maiden name. 2 antique books, Wuthering Heights, first edition, and a collection of Emily Dickinson's poems that I bought at an auction 10 years ago. All of these items are documented in photographs, with dates and sometimes even the value. I open a new folder in my computer and start scanning these photos, giving each file the name of the item and the approximate date it went missing. Then I sit down and make a detailed list of all the missing items with descriptions, approximate value, and circumstances of the disappearance. It's an impressive 5-page document. Then I pull out my financial records. I had always kept strict records of my and Norman's expenses, recording every dollar spent out of the total budget. These records clearly show when the money in my wallet began to disappear small amounts, $20 to $50, that I usually kept for small purchases. These disappearances began about 6 months ago, almost immediately after Clayton and Octavia started coming over for dinner on Fridays on a regular basis. I print out the list, attach photos to it, and put everything in a new folder. Then I open my banking app and check the status of the credit card transactions that Clayton and Octavia stole. To my surprise, both transactions, for the Bali trip and for the jewelry, have been canceled. The charge-off amounts are now marked refund instead of the charge-off amounts, and the card balance shows the full available limit. So they've kept at least part of their promise. I call Clayton, but he doesn't answer. Instead, a few minutes later, a message arrives. We've canceled everything. We'll get the rest back on Friday. Please give us time. I show the message to Norman when he returns from the store. He reads it with an unreadable expression on his face. At least they canceled the transactions, he finally says. That's something. Yeah, but what about everything else? I can't hide my skepticism. Do you really think they're going to return all the stolen stuff? Norman shrugs, his eyes dim. Dash. I don't know, Vivian. I'm not sure of anything anymore. He looks 10 years older. His shoulders are slumped, and there's an emptiness in his eyes that I've never seen before. It breaks my heart. Norman, I take his hand. We need to talk about this. We can't just ignore what happened. What's there to talk about? He looks away. Our son and his wife stole from us. They betrayed our trust. His voice breaks. I don't know how to live with that, Vivian. I squeeze his hand tighter. We'll get through this, Norman. Together. But we have to figure out what to do next. And what do you suggest? He finally looks at me, pain and confusion in his eyes. I think we should consult a lawyer, I say quietly. Not necessarily to sue, but to understand our options. Norman is silent for a long time, considering my words. Okay, he finally says. If you think it's necessary. The next day, I call Harriet Caldwell, the lawyer who helped us with the will a few years ago. She agrees to meet with me that same day, and by noon, I'm sitting in her cozy office in downtown Downers Grove. Harriet is a woman my age, with short gray hair and shrewd blue eyes behind the panes of her thin-rimmed glasses. She listens intently as I tell the whole story, not interrupting and only occasionally making notes in her notebook. When I finish, she takes off her glasses and rubs the bridge of her nose. It's a complicated situation, Vivian, especially since we're talking about your son, she says. But the facts remain. They've committed a theft, and more than one. What are our options? I ask. Legally, you have grounds for a police report, Harriet replies. Theft and credit card fraud are serious crimes, especially when you're talking about such sums of money. Using a stolen credit card to pay for $56,000 worth of travel and jewelry is a federal crime, to be exact. I nod, feeling a heaviness in my chest. What happens to Clayton and Octavia if we file a report? Worst case scenario, jail time, Harriet says bluntly, not trying to soften reality. A more likely scenario is probation, community service, and an obligation to pay compensation. But their reputations will certainly be affected, especially on Clayton's career as an architect. Client confidence could be undermined. I sigh. Despite everything that's happened, the thought that my son could end up in jail or lose his career hurts me. Are there other options? I ask. Something less drastic? Harriet puts her glasses back on and flips through her notes. You could try to settle the matter privately, make an agreement with them to return all the stolen items and compensate them for the damage. Perhaps with the condition of undergoing psychological counseling or therapy. This will not have legal force if not notarized, but may be the first step to restoring at least some relationship. And you think that would work? Honestly? Harriet looks at me carefully. It depends on their sincerity and their willingness to change. From your story, they've already canceled the credit card transactions, which could be a good sign. But the fact remains that they have been systematically ripping you off for a long time. That suggests serious problems. I nod, realizing she's right. What would you do if you were me? I ask. Harriet thinks for a moment. I'd give them one chance, she says finally. One chance to return everything they stole, to apologize and prove that they want to change. If they don't take that chance, or if the thefts continue, then I would go to the police. Sometimes people need to face the consequences of their actions to truly change. I thank Harriet for her advice and head back home, mulling over our conversation. Her words seem reasonable to me, and I'm leaning toward giving Clayton and Octavia this last chance. But the decision must be a joint one, mine and Norman's. At home, I catch Norman in his chair in front of the television, even though the screen is off. He just sits there staring into the void. When I walk in, he doesn't even look up. Norman? I walk over and sit down next to him. Are you okay? He slowly turns toward me. His eyes are red, like he's been crying. I keep trying to figure out where we went wrong, he says quietly. What did we do wrong in raising him? How could he do this to us? I take his hand. It's cold and calloused. We didn't make a mistake, Norman. We gave him everything we could: love, care, education, support. We taught him the difference between right and wrong. It's not our fault he made that choice. Then whose fault is it? He looks at me with despair. Octavia? She's a bad influence, that's understandable. But he's a grown man, Vivian. He should have known better. I don't know whose fault it is, I answer honestly. Maybe it's both of them. Maybe the circumstances. Maybe it's just life. People do bad things sometimes, even good people. I always thought he was a good man. Norman's voice trembles. I was proud of him. And now I don't know who he is. I realize that my husband is going through the same thing I went through when I first suspected Clayton of stealing. The same pain, the same mistrust, the same sense of betrayal. Only it's even harder for him because he's always idealized his son. I spoke to Harriet Caldwell, I say, changing the subject. She thinks we have grounds for a police report, but suggests we try to resolve the matter privately first, give them a chance to make things right. Norman nods, but without much enthusiasm. What do you think? He asks. I think she's right. We can give them one chance to prove that they want to change. If they return everything they stole and apologize sincerely, maybe we can, I don't know, not forgive, but at least move on. And if they don't, then we'll go to the police, I say firmly. I'm not going to let them keep stealing from us and think they can get away with it. Norman is silent for a long time, staring out the window at the fall garden. Finally, he turns to me. I'll take it, he says. One chance, but no more. I nod and put my arms around him. We sit like this for a while, holding each other, finding comfort in this closeness. The next morning, I call Clayton, but he doesn't answer again. I leave a voicemail saying that we are expecting them on Friday as usual and expect to get all of the stolen goods back. I also mentioned that we've consulted an attorney and that this is their last chance to resolve things amicably. Clayton doesn't call back, but an hour later, a text comes back. We will. Thanks for the chance. The remaining days until Friday stretch agonizingly slowly. Norman barely leaves his workshop, working on yet another wooden box with such ferocity as if he's trying to carve his pain out of the wood. I immerse myself in working on my notes, completing the list of stolen items, looking through old photographs, trying to remember what else might be missing. In the evenings, we hardly talk at all. We watch TV in silence, eat dinner, exchanging only the necessary phrases. A wall of silence has grown between us, and I fear that if we don't resolve the Clayton situation, our marriage may not be able to withstand the strain. Thursday night, as we prepare for bed, I decide to break the silence. Norman, I say, sitting down on the edge of the bed. We can't go on living like this. It's destroying us. He stops halfway to the bathroom and turns to me. I know, he says quietly. I just don't know what to say, what to do. I feel empty. I understand. I nod. I do too. But we can't let Clayton and Octavia's actions ruin what we have. We've been together for 42 years, Norman. We've been through so much: Clayton's birth, your mother's illness, my health problems, financial difficulties. And we've always stuck together. Norman comes over and sits down next to me. For the first time in days, he actually looks me in the eye. You're right, he says, taking my hand. I don't want this to ruin us. It's just, it hurts so much, Vivian, to feel betrayed by your own son. I know, I squeeze his hand. Believe me, I know. But we have to be strong. We're going to have a tough conversation tomorrow, and we need to be together in this. A united front. You've always been stronger than me, Norman says with a sad smile. Always knew what to do. That's not true. I shake my head. I just pretend to know. In reality, I'm just as scared and confused as you are. But I know one thing. I'm not going to let this situation destroy our family, not our marriage, nor, if possible, our relationship with Clayton. Norman nods and wraps his arms around me. We sit for so long, in silence, but it's no longer the heavy silence it used to be. It's the silence of acceptance, of understanding. When we finally go to bed, I feel something has changed. The wall between us hasn't completely disappeared, but there's a crack in it, and light is coming through. And I know that no matter what happens tomorrow with Clayton and Octavia, Norman and I will make it through. Together. In the morning, I wake up with renewed determination. Tonight, everything has to be resolved. Either Clayton and Octavia return everything they stole, and we begin the long and arduous process of rebuilding trust, or we have to do what I never wanted to do: go to the police against my own son. I make breakfast for Norman and me: scrambled eggs and bacon, his favorite. We eat in a relatively comfortable silence, occasionally exchanging glances that are more understanding than they've been in days. Are you ready for tonight? I ask as we finish our breakfast. Norman nods, his face serious. Yes. Whatever happens, we can handle it together. I smile, feeling a rush of love for this man who, despite the pain and disappointment, still finds the strength to move forward. Together, I repeat, and in that word is the promise of our life together. The day of our crucial dinner with Clayton and Octavia, I spend the day in the kitchen preparing the dishes my son has always loved. Norman offered to order food from the restaurant, saying I didn't have to try for the people who were ripping us off. But I declined. It wasn't for them. It was for me. Cooking has always calmed me, allowed me to organize my thoughts. And today, I need it more than ever. I'm making a roast from my mother's recipe, with rosemary and garlic, a baked potato with cheese, a salad of fresh vegetables. For dessert, apple pie, which Clayton adored as a child. I'm not trying to bribe him with food, but I want this to be an important evening for all of us. Perhaps the last family dinner. Norman spends the day in the garage finishing another wooden box. When he returns to the house around 4 in the afternoon, his hands smell of sandalwood and a look of determination is frozen on his face. "It's beautiful," he says when I ask about the box. "The lid is inlaid, just the way you like it." I realize he made it for me. His way of saying he's on my side, that we're together. I put my arms around him, and we stand like this for a few minutes, gaining strength from each other. At 5 o'clock in the evening, I check my evidence folder. Everything is in place: photos of the missing items, a list with dates and circumstances of the disappearance, printouts of credit card transactions. I don't know if I'll need all that today, but I better be ready. At 5:45, the doorbell rings. I flinch. They're 15 minutes early, which they've never done. Norman goes to open it, and I stay in the kitchen, breathing deeply to calm myself down. I hear voices in the hallway, muffled greetings, awkward exchanges of pleasantries. Then footsteps, and Clayton and Octavia enter the kitchen, followed by Norman. Clayton looks gaunt, with dark circles under his eyes, as if he had not slept for several nights. Octavia is as impeccably dressed as ever, in a black suit and white blouse, her hair in a perfect bun. But her usual arrogance has been replaced by tension. She's as straight as a string, ready to tingle at the slightest touch. "Mom," Clayton takes a step forward. We brought something." He sets a medium-sized cardboard box on the table. I step closer and look inside. There lies my pearl necklace, my grandmother's brooch, a silver spoon from my mother's set, and a few other things I noticed missing. But not all of them. I can see right away that antique books and a few other pieces of jewelry are missing. "Is that everything?" I ask, trying to remain calm. Clayton and Octavia exchange glances. "Yes," Clayton says. "Everything we took." I notice his hesitation before the word took. Even now he avoids saying stole. I decide not to insist on it. Bye. "Let's sit at the table," I say. Dinner is almost ready. We sit down, Norman and I on one side of the table, Clayton and Octavia on the other. Between us are the platters of food I've prepared, and an invisible wall of distrust and resentment. I put the roast on for everyone, and for a while, we eat in silence. Clayton barely touches his food, only occasionally raising his fork to his lips. Octavia eats small, careful portions, never taking her eyes off her plate. Norman chews mechanically, as if he can't taste. I am the only one who eats with appetite weirdly. Tension has always made me hungry. When the plates are half empty, I decide it's time to start talking. "So," I say, setting my fork aside, "you got some of your stuff back." "That's good, but not all of it." Clayton looks up from his plate. "What do you mean? We returned everything we took." "No," I shake my head. "Not everything. Where are the antique books? Where are my pearl earrings? Where's the silver sapphire brooch Aunt Rose gave me?" Clayton turns pale. "Mama, I swear we didn't take any books or earrings." "Don't lie to me, Clayton," I interrupt him firmly but calmly. I've made a complete list of everything that's gone missing from our house in the last 6 months, with dates, descriptions, and even pictures. I know exactly what's missing and when. I pull out the folder I'd placed next to my chair and open it on the table. Clayton and Octavia stare at the printouts and photos with an expression of growing concern. "You started with the little things," I continue, flipping through the pages, "money from my wallet. Then you moved on to small jewelry, earrings, bracelets, then to the more valuable items, a silver spoon, brooches, and finally, my pearl necklace. This was a systematic robbery, not random impulsive thefts." Octavia finally raises her eyes from her plate. Vivian, we understand you're upset. Her voice sounds controlled, professional. But maybe you're exaggerating. Some things could have just gotten lost. You don't have to talk to me like I'm a senile old woman, Octavia. I look her straight in the eye. I don't lose things. I know exactly what and where things are in my house. And I know for a fact that you and Clayton have been systematically stealing from us for the last 6 months. Norman, who has been silent until now, puts his fork away with a clatter that makes everyone flinch. Stop denying the obvious, he says, his voice shaking with barely contained anger. We've given you a chance to make things right, to return what was stolen, to apologize, to make a clean slate, but you continue to lie even now. Clayton's head is down. Dad, No. Octavia puts her hand on Clayton's arm, stopping him. We didn't steal anything except what we've already returned. And we only took the credit card because we thought it was a gift. Vivian obviously left it in a prominent place in the jewelry box. Yes, I left it there on purpose, I say calmly, as bait, because I knew you were stealing our things, and I wanted to catch you red-handed. See? Octavia turns to Norman, ignoring me. She admits she set the trap herself. She's been against me from the beginning, against our marriage to Clayton. She always looked down on me, thought I wasn't good enough for her precious son. That's not true. I shake my head. I gave you a chance, Octavia. I tried to find in you what Clayton saw in you, but from day one, you treated us like ATMS, not family. Because that's how you acted. Octavia raises her voice. You with your big house, with your savings, with your affluent life. Clayton and I are barely making ends meet. He's a talented architect, but he's underappreciated. My boutique is just starting to turn a profit. We deserve a better life. And that gives you the right to steal from us? Norman asks quietly. We're not stealing, Clayton intervenes. We were just borrowing. We were going to pay it all back when we got back on our feet. Borrowing? I can't believe my ears. Without our knowledge or permission? That's called stealing, Clayton. And don't try to justify it on the grounds of financial hardship. If you needed money, you could have just asked. We've always helped you when you needed it. Helped? Octavia snorted. Clayton tells me how you helped. Always with conditions, always with lectures. We'll give you money for college, but you have to study what we think is right. We'll help with a down payment on an apartment, but you have to live where we say. That's not help, that's control. I look at Clayton, who avoids my gaze. Is that right, Clayton? I ask quietly. Do you think we were controlling you? That we were bad parents? Clayton is silent, but Octavia answers for him. Of course we were. You were cold, calculating parents who cared more about him meeting your expectations than about his happiness. You never supported his dreams, never truly believed in him. That's not true. Norman shakes his head. We've always supported Clayton. We paid for his education, helped with his first apartment, his first car. We were always there for him when he needed us. Yeah, but with conditions. Octavia doesn't give up, always with conditions and expectations. We'll do this for you, but in return, you have to. That's not unconditional love. That's manipulation. I look at Clayton, who is still silent with his head down. Clayton, I say softly, look at me. He slowly raises his eyes. They're a mixture of shame, anger, and something else I can't quite put my finger on. Do you really think so? I ask. That we were bad parents? That we didn't love you unconditionally? Clayton opens his mouth but doesn't utter a word. Octavia intervenes again. Of course he thinks that. Why do you think he stopped coming to see you so often after we were married? Because I finally showed him what true love looks like. Unconditional. No expectations or demands. Unconditional love doesn't require stealing from your parents, I say calmly. And if you really love him, Octavia, why would you let him risk his reputation, his career, maybe even his freedom for your whims? For designer handbags and vacations in the Maldives? Octavia blushes with anger. Don't you dare accuse me. It was his choice. He wanted to give me a better life because he loves me. And that's why you made him steal his mother's credit card? Norman asks, his voice shaking with anger. Made him use it to pay for $56,000 worth of travel and jewelry? Is that your idea of love? I didn't force anyone. Octavia is almost shouting. Clayton, tell them. Tell them it was your idea. All eyes turn to Clayton, who looks like he wants to fall through the ground. That, it was our plan together, he finally says. We both wanted a better life. We were both tired of living from paycheck to paycheck, of seeing our friends traveling, buying houses, living life to the fullest, while we could barely afford dinner at a decent restaurant once a month. Is that why you decided to steal from us? I ask. We decided to take what we thought we were owed. Clayton looks me in the eye with defiance. You've accumulated enough in your lifetime. You could have shared. We would have shared if you had asked, Norman says quietly. We've always been there for you, son. Always. With conditions? Clayton chuckles bitterly. Always with conditions. The only condition is that you be honest. I look at him painfully. We didn't demand the impossible of you, Clayton. We just wanted you to be a decent person, to respect us and yourself. Respect you? Octavia snorts. After you always looked at me like I was dirt under your feet? After you refused to give us money for a down payment on a house, even though you knew how important it was to us? We didn't refuse, Norman objected. We offered to help you with the down payment, but you wanted a house you couldn't afford. We just advised you to start with something more modest. See? Octavia turns to Clayton. Control. Always control. I look at both of them and suddenly realize they're not remorseful. They don't think they did anything wrong. They justify their thefts with grudges and grievances, many of which exist only in their imaginations. We've consulted a lawyer, I say calmly. Harriet Caldwell said we have every reason to report the theft to the police. Theft and credit card fraud are serious offenses. Clayton and Octavia turn pale at the same time. You wouldn't do that, Octavia says, but her voice is no longer as confident as before. You will not report your own son. We hoped it wouldn't come to this, Norman replies. We gave you a chance to make things right, to return what you stole, to apologize, to start over, but instead, you keep lying and accusing us of every mortal sin. We got back what we took. Clayton's pointing to a box of stuff. We canceled the credit card transactions. What more do you want? The truth, I say, and everything that was stolen. Not just what you admit to, but everything. Books, earrings, brooch, everything. We didn't take any books or earrings. Octavia raises her voice again. Then explain where they went. I cross my arms over my chest. Because they disappeared after your visits, like everything else. Maybe you lost them. Octavia throws her napkin on the table. Maybe you're getting forgetful as you age. Maybe you're just looking for an excuse to blame us because you never accepted me into the family. I look at her for a long moment, then nod slowly. Okay, I say. If you insist on your innocence, I think we'll have to leave it to the police to decide. What? Clayton looks startled. We've already turned over all the evidence to the police, I say calmly. Photos of the missing items, a list of dates, details of credit card transactions. They said it was enough to prosecute. That's a lie. We haven't gone to the police, but I want to see their reaction. Clayton and Octavia exchange panicked glances. You couldn't do that. Octavia whispers. You wouldn't? Why not? Norman asks, picking up my game. You stole from us, lied to us, and now you blame us for all your problems. Why should we protect you from the consequences of your own actions? Clayton stands up suddenly, his chair falling to the floor with a clatter. All right, he shouts. Yes, we got the books, and the earrings, and the brooch. We took everything you listed and more. We sold most of these things to pay our bills, our travels, our lives. Are you happy now? You have your confession. He breathes heavily, his face contorted with anger and shame. Octavia looks at him with an expression of horror. Clayton, what are you doing? She hisses. Shut up. What does it matter, Octavia? He turns to her. They already know everything. They've already gone to the police. What have I got to lose? Your career, our reputation, everything. She's getting up too. We have to leave immediately and talk to a lawyer. It's the only way. Sit down, Norman says quietly, but with such force that they both fall silent and slowly sit back down. We're not done yet. I look at them, my son and his wife, scared, angry, cornered. I feel no satisfaction at their confession, only deep sadness. We haven't gone to the police, I finally say. Not yet. We wanted to give you a chance to do the right thing. Admit your guilt, return the stolen goods, apologize. Start over. Clayton and Octavia look at me in disbelief. You lied, Octavia says accusingly. Yes, I nod. So did you. The difference is that my lie was meant to expose the truth, and yours was meant to cover up a crime. What are you going to do now? Clayton asks, his voice sounding tired. That's up to you, Norman replies. You can return everything you've stolen. Everything, not just what you admit at once. You can apologize, sincerely, without excuses or accusations. And we can try to start again, with rules, with boundaries, but no police. And if we don't agree? Octavia lifts her chin. Then we'll go to the police, I say simply. We have all the evidence we need. And this time, I'm not bluffing. Clayton and Octavia stare at each other, a silent conversation taking place between them. Finally, Clayton turns to us. We agree, he says quietly. We'll give back everything we took. And we apologize. I apologize. I look at him carefully, trying to see if he's sincere or just saying what we want to hear. In his eyes, I see shame, fear, but also something else. Relief, maybe? Relief that he doesn't have to lie anymore? Octavia doesn't say anything, just sits stone-faced, avoiding our gazes. Okay, I say. We expect all remaining items to be returned within a week. If anything has been sold, you'll have to make up the cost. And we want a complete list of everything you took, not just from what I noticed, but everything. Clayton nods. And one more thing, Norman adds. No more visits until we're sure you've really changed. No family dinners, no celebrations together. First, you have to prove you deserve our trust. What? Clayton looks shocked. But, we're a family. Family doesn't steal from each other, I say quietly. A family doesn't lie to each other. A family doesn't manipulate or blame each other to avoid responsibility. You destroyed what made us a family, Clayton, and it's going to take time to rebuild that, if it's even possible. Clayton lowers his head, but doesn't object. Octavia looks at him with an expression I can't quite make out, a mixture of anger, frustration, and maybe contempt. I wonder if their marriage will hold up under the pressure of this crisis. Now, I think you'd better leave, Norman says, standing up. We'll contact you about the rest of your things. Clayton and Octavia get up as well. Clayton looks like he wants to say something, but changes his mind at the last moment. They walk silently to the door, Norman following them. I remain seated at the table amidst the remnants of a dinner no one has finished, and I feel a strange emptiness inside. I've gotten what I wanted, a confession, a promise to return what I stole. But I lost my son. Maybe not forever, but for now, yes. And it hurts. When Norman returns, his face is serious. "They're gone," he says, sitting down next to me. "Clayton says he'll contact us tomorrow about the rest of the stuff." I nod, not trusting my voice. "Are you okay?" Norman asks, taking my hand. "No," I answer honestly. "But I will be. We will be." We sit in silence, holding hands, amidst the ruins of what was once our family. But there is no despair in that silence, only acceptance and determination to move on, no matter what happens. The week after our crucial dinner with Clayton and Octavia passes in a strange lull. They don't call or visit, even though Clayton promised to contact us about the rest of our belongings. I'm not surprised. They're probably still in shock from the revelation, perhaps fighting among themselves, blaming each other for the failure. Or, more likely, they just aren't going to fulfill their promise. Friday morning, as Norman and I are having breakfast, the doorbell rings. On the doorstep stands a delivery man with a large cardboard box. "Delivery for Mr. and Mrs. Thornberry," he says, holding out a clipboard for me to sign. I sign and take the box, which is unexpectedly heavy. Inside are our missing things: antique books, pearl earrings, a silver sapphire brooch, and a few other items I hadn't even noticed were missing. And a note written in Clayton's handwriting: "This is all we took. Forgive us." I show the contents of the box to Norman, and he nods silently, his face impenetrable. We both know that a simple "I'm sorry" can't undo the damage done, can't bring back the trust that has been broken, can't erase the memory of betrayal. That same Friday afternoon, we go to see Harriet Caldwell, our lawyer. I'm not alone this time. Norman and I walk together, holding hands as we enter her office. "So they recovered the stolen items," Harriet summarizes, listening to us recount what happened at dinner and afterwards. "That's a good sign. But you still decided to change the will?" "Yes," I say firmly. "We both have." Norman nods, confirming my words. "We can't entrust our inheritance to someone who has already betrayed our trust once," he says. "Who knows what they'll do in the future? We don't want the money and things we've accumulated over a lifetime to be squandered on luxury travel and designer bags." Harriet nods understandingly and pulls out the papers. "I've prepared a new version of the will according to your instructions," she says. "Instead of leaving the entire estate to Clayton, you're distributing it to several charitable organizations, including the Downers Grove Historical Museum, where you worked, Vivian, and the Alzheimer's Research Foundation, which Norman supports in memory of his mother." I look through the documents, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and determination. I never thought I'd have to disinherit my own son, but he's made that choice through his own actions. "That's right," I say, handing the documents to Norman. "This is exactly what we discussed." Norman reads the will slowly, his face growing more serious with each page. Finally, he hands the documents back to Harriet. "Yes, that's what we want," he says quietly. We sign the new wills in the presence of witnesses, Harriet's secretaries. When the formalities are complete, Harriet collects the documents and looks at us sympathetically. "I understand how hard this decision has been for you," she says, "but sometimes the hardest decisions are the right ones." "You're right," I nod, "but that doesn't make it any easier." "As for the police," Harriet begins. "We've decided not to go to the police," Norman interrupts. "At least not yet. They returned the things, and we don't want to ruin our son's life completely. Exclusion from the will is punishment enough." Harriet nods. "I understand, but if they do anything against you again, then we'll go straight to the police," I say firmly. "One chance is all they'll get. We say goodbye to Harriet and go outside. The day is overcast, a light drizzle reflecting our mood. Do you want to go somewhere for coffee? Norman asks as we get into the car. Or go straight home? I hesitate for a moment. I'd like to stop by the museum, I say. I haven't been there in a while. Norman smiles for the first time in days. Sure, he says, starting the car. That's a good idea. The Downers Grove Historical Museum is a small two-story red brick building in the center of town. I've worked here for 35 years, rising from junior staff member to chief curator. As we enter, the familiar smell of old books and wood polish envelops me, like the embrace of an old friend. Sitting at the front desk is Lorraine Higgins, a former colleague of mine and now the museum's director. When she sees me, she smiles broadly and steps out from behind the counter to give me a hug. "Vivian, what a pleasant surprise," she exclaims. "And Norman, it's been so long since I've seen you." "Hello, Lorraine," I said, smiling back. "We were driving by and thought we'd stop by. How are things at the museum?" "Oh, it's the same old thing," she says, waving her hand. "The constant struggle for funding, trying to attract visitors. You know how it is. But we have some new exhibits that I think you might be interested in seeing." Lorraine takes us through the halls of the museum, showing us the new acquisitions and talking about future plans. I listen to her with growing interest, feeling the museum reawakening in me long forgotten emotions, curiosity, enthusiasm, a sense of belonging to something bigger than myself. "We're understaffed right now," Lorraine says as we finish our tour. "Betty has retired and James has moved to Chicago. We're looking for volunteers, especially those with museum experience." She looks at me expectantly, and I realize what she's getting at. "Are you suggesting I come back?" I ask with a smile. "Not full-time, of course," Lorraine says quickly. "Just as a volunteer, a couple days a week. You could help catalog new exhibits, give tours to school children, anything you want." I look back at Norman, who smiles and nods. "I think that's a great idea," he says. "You need something to do, Vivian, something that brings you joy." I think for a moment. After everything that happened with Clayton and Octavia, I really need something new, something to help me move on. And the museum has always been my second home. "Okay," I say. "I agree. 2 days a week, for starters." Lorraine claps her hands with joy. "Oh, that's wonderful. We're so glad you're coming back, Vivian. When can you start?" "How about next week?" I suggest. "Tuesday and Thursday?" "Perfect." Lorraine hugs me. "I'm so glad you'll be with us again." We say goodbye and walk out of the museum. The rain has stopped and the sun is shining through the breaks in the clouds. "Are you sure you don't mind?" I ask Norman as we walk to the car. "It means that 2 days a week you'll have to cook your own lunch." "I can live with that," he laughs, putting his arm around my shoulders. "Besides, you need this, Vivian. You need something of your own, something to give you purpose and joy." I snuggle into him, grateful for his understanding and support. "Thank you," I say softly, "for everything." Norman kisses the top of my head, and we walk on, holding hands like a couple of teenagers. The next few weeks go by in a nice routine. Tuesdays and Thursdays, I work at the museum, cataloging new exhibits and giving tours to school children. The rest of the days, I am busy with the house, gardening, and my new hobby of painting. Norman gave me a set of acrylic paints and an easel for our 43rd wedding anniversary, which we celebrated in a quiet restaurant on the edge of town. I'm not a great talent, but I love mixing colors, creating on canvas what I see around me: our garden, our house, the streets of Downers Grove. Each painting is a small victory over the void that has formed in my life since the separation from my son. Clayton doesn't call or visit. Sometimes I check his social media page. Yes, at my age, I know how to use Facebook, and see occasional posts about his work, new projects. Nothing personal, nothing about us. Octavia's profile has become private. She has restricted access to her postings. I'm not trying to add as a friend. I respect her decision as she hopefully respects ours. One Saturday, as I'm working in the garden, weeding beds of late-blooming flowers, the mail car pulls up. The mailman hands me a package with the official seal of the DuPage County Courthouse. I open it inside the house, hands shaking. Inside is a subpoena. Clayton and Octavia are charged with theft and credit card fraud. But not by us, by the bank that issued the credit card they stole. Norman, I call out, and he comes out of the garage, wiping his hands on a rag. Look at this. He reads the paperwork, his eyebrows rising higher and higher. The bank sued them? He looks at me puzzled. But we didn't go to the police. I guess we didn't have to. I shake my head. The bank noticed suspicious activity, first large transactions, then cancellations. They investigated and found out that the card was used by someone other than the owner, and now they're pressing charges. What do you want to do? Norman asks. I think for a long time before answering. Nothing, I finally say. We won't get involved. This is a matter between the bank and them. They have to face the consequences of their actions. Norman nods, his face serious. You're right. We gave them a chance. They took it, partially. Now, let them answer to the law. That same day, I get a text from Clayton. Mom, please help us. The bank is suing us. We're facing jail time. I show the message to Norman, and we have a long discussion about what to do. Finally, I reply, we won't get involved, Clayton. You chose this path for yourself. Now you're going to have to face the consequences. Hire a good lawyer. Is that harsh? Maybe. But sometimes cruelty is necessary to make a man realize the gravity of his actions. The trial is scheduled for mid-November. Norman and I decide not to attend. It's not our case, and we don't want to add to the pain of seeing our son tried for a crime. Instead, we wait for news from Harriet, who has promised to let us know the outcome. They come in the form of a phone call on the day of the trial, in the evening. Clayton and Octavia were given 3 years probation, Harriet reports, plus community service and a $20,000 fine. Lucky for them, the judge took into account that they returned the money and had no prior convictions. I thank Harriet for the information and hang up, feeling strangely relieved. Probation is not prison. They won't lose their freedom, although Clayton will probably lose his job. Not many architectural firms would want to keep someone with a criminal record on staff. The next day, a letter arrives from Clayton. A real paper letter, handwritten. That's a rarity in these days of electronic communication. Dear Mom and Dad, he writes, yesterday was the court date. We were given probation, a fine and community service. I know I deserved it, and more. I want to apologize, sincerely, without excuses, for what I did, for betraying your trust, stealing from you, lying to you. There is no excuse for my actions, and I am not apologizing. I just want you to know that I realize the gravity of my actions, and I repent for them every day. Octavia and I broke up. After the trial, she said she couldn't be with the man who ruined her reputation and career. Maybe it was for the best. I can see now how she manipulated me, how she used my love for her to get me to do things that went against my values. I'm not asking you to accept me back into the family. I know I broke the trust that we had between us, and it may never be rebuilt. I just wanted you to know that I love you both and always will, regardless of whether you can ever forgive me. Love, Clayton. I reread the letter several times before handing it to Norman. He reads silently, his face expressing no emotion. When he finishes, he looks up at me. What do you think? He asks. I don't know, I answer honestly. It sounds sincere, but we've been burned before. Norman nods, looking at the letter again. He and Octavia broke up, he says thoughtfully. Maybe, without her influence, he can go back to who he used to be. Maybe, I agree. But it's going to take time, and we can't just forget what happened. Of course not, Norman shakes his head. But maybe in time. Not now, but someday. He doesn't finish the sentence, but I know what he means. Maybe someday we can try to rebuild a relationship with Clayton. Not like before, that's impossible, but something new based on honesty, respect, and firm boundaries. Maybe, I said again, but not now. Norman nods, and we don't revisit the subject for the next few weeks. Life goes on as usual. I work at the museum, paint, garden. Norman tinkers in the garage, goes fishing, plays chess with friends from the jazz club. We go out more often, dine in restaurants, go to the theater, concerts. It's like we're trying to make up for lost time, to fill the void Clayton left behind. One evening, as we sit on the porch watching the sunset, Norman takes my hand. "Do you regret what we did?" he asks. For cutting Clayton out of the will? About not helping him with the trial? I think for a long time before I answer. No, I finally say. It was necessary. For him, for us. Sometimes you have to let people face the consequences of their actions so they can change. Norman nods, squeezing my hand. I agree. But sometimes I miss him. The boy he was. I do too, I admit. Every day. We sit in silence, watching the sun disappear over the horizon, coloring the sky shades of pink and gold. I think about how much we've been through in these months. The pain of betrayal, the bitterness of disappointment, the weight of difficult decisions, but also the moment of truth, the realization of our strength, the strengthening of our connection to each other. The breakup with Clayton and Octavia was painful but necessary, like surgery removing diseased tissue so the rest of the body can live and thrive. Norman and I grew closer, stronger, wiser. We found new sources of joy and meaning in life: the museum, painting, friends, each other. And who knows, maybe someday Clayton will truly change, realize his mistakes, become a man we can trust again. Maybe all is not lost. But even if that doesn't happen, I know we did the right thing. We protected ourselves, our love, our dignity. We didn't let a toxic relationship destroy what we have. Norman leans over and kisses my cheek. "I love you, Vivian," he says simply. "Thank you for what you are." I smile, snuggling up to him. "I love you too, Norman. Always have and always will." We sit holding hands as the last rays of the sun disappear over the horizon. The unknown lies ahead, but we face it together as we have faced everything in our lives, with love, courage, and faith in each other.